Welcome everybody to the Fantasy Golf Insider Webcast and Podcast. I'm Jeff Bergerson, joined as always by my partner, Zachary Turcotte. Zachary, it's so good to be back after a week.
Did you have a wet and wild vacation?
It was a good time in Wisconsin Dells, but Perry did a wonderful job filling in for me, so thank you.
Setting them cranked up a little bit.
That's right.
A couple of cocktails, a couple of shots, he loosened right up.
That's all it takes for him.
Yeah.
I have to have 8 to 10 shots before I'm feeling pretty good. Right. Yeah. Anyway, we're with fantasygolfinsider.com, where you need to go check us out if you are not already a premium member. Get the leading information to win the $1 million this week for the fourth and final major, the PGA Championship. I should also mention this broadcast is available as a podcast on iTunes and Stitcher. Go on there. You can download it. Give us a good review on both of those. That really helps us out. Like I said, the PGA Championship this week, Zachary. But first, you want to talk a little bit about the Canadian Open last week? Or not really?
Not really at all.
Johnny Vegas comes up with the victory.
Yeah, which was nice to see from him after the week prior. He had such a huge lead in the week prior event and then kind of caved in the last day again and ended up taking third place or so, which was pretty disappointing. Jumps back in the following week at the Canadian Open and was kind of in the mix on the last day, but was definitely not the guy that I would have thought would have posted an 8 under in order to pull it off, especially with all the talented guys that were up near the top that day. But it was a great win for him. Tough weekend overall. We had a lot of value plays that went absolutely sideways. Friday afternoon was just up and down. I mean, it started kind of down. I didn't think things were going to go great, and we had a bunch of guys sneak through the cut. Grillo fought back. Bergerson fought back. A lot of guys were playing pretty well to make it through. And then late afternoon, it looked like things were coming our direction. Colton Oast maybe was going to rally back from just an obscene start. And then we had Summer Hayes was in pretty good shape. David Hearn was in good shape.
For Hearn.
We had so many guys that were in my cash lineups that looked like they were going to pull through, and it was going to be a great week, and we were going to sweep. And then right at the same time, mid-afternoon, Summer Hayes goes into the water, Hearn out of bounds, and then all of us, it was just, the momentum just swept everything up and took everybody out. Obviously, things got off to a rough start for our first optimal lineup. I wasn't even really on Charlie Hoffman last week, but the optimal lineup kind of pegged him as a guy within the optimal lineup. And of course, he pulls out of the event about 15 minutes before tee-off time. So if you were awake at 5:50 a.m. Central Time last week, or 3:50 out on the West Coast.
Well, that's let's talk a little bit about that. What's your take on what can we do? Because obviously it's a terrible thing for DFS golf.
I'm not sure why DraftKings can't keep the window open a little bit longer. I mean, even if you don't have it open throughout the entire day, maybe you have it open through the first 2 or 3 hours after tee-off, because that's when you get all of the withdrawals. And the withdrawals take place at 5 in the morning, 6 in the morning. So if you're like me and you're up till midnight finishing up Periscope and finishing up building lineups and then falling asleep, here on the couch at the end of the night, you don't always wake up at 5 in the morning. I woke up at 7. Of course, I had several messages on my phone, Hoffman withdraw. I'm thinking, great, well, there goes one of the lineups immediately. So I really think they could do something to work out. I really don't understand why
they can't. It for football. I understand it's a little bit different because
they do it for baseball. I mean, they do it for all of the other sports. So I don't really know what difference it would make, because if guys got off to, typically guys play well in the AM on Thursdays to begin with. So if you just decided, well, I'm just going to skip that AM wave to get some sort of bogus advantage, probably wouldn't happen.
No.
You'd probably just miss the best time of the day in terms of when guys were teeing off. So I really don't understand why they couldn't wait until guys teed off to close them off in terms of when they were out there, because you get such a tight window. It's almost impossible to make the switch. You pretty much have to be staring at Twitter, because it's not like NFL.
That's right. It's
where you've
not
got sideline reporter Pam Oliver reporting live from Philadelphia.
That you can watch the same spot at the same time every week.
Immediately they're gonna tell you which guys are out. We got to be on Twitter waiting for things to refresh, pulling things up, and then hopefully you catch it in time. So
I just think it's bad for the game. You have people new to into it and they roster a Charlie Hoffman or a Daniel Berger or a Brooks Koepka, week after week, and they're going to hate it.
Yeah, it's
you play result. And they withdraw day one. Oh, forget it. I'm not going to play it. It's no fun. So
yeah, I don't like that.
I think they need to do something. I don't know exactly what it is, but a late lock of some sort would be helpful for the game.
Yeah.
Talk one more. Probably, is there any doubt? Let's go into shots of the week, because is there really any doubt what we're going to do with this one?
Yeah, I called it right when it happened. Pretty brutal. Steve Wheatcroft, it's kind of the Cinderella story of the week. Gets it to 18, and he gets it into the bunker there for his second shot. So he's actually playing. If he hits the shot out of the bunker, he pulls a Bubba Watson, can put it out of the bunker and into the cup. He'll actually win right there.
He'll win, yep.
But you're not really expecting that. You're just hoping he gets it up and out of the bunker, and he just gives himself a decent opportunity for birdie.
And it was not a difficult shot.
No.
for these guys.
No, I mean, we weren't talking about Oakmont. We weren't talking about Royal Troon pot bunker.
Right.
I mean, we're not talking about anything absurd like that. And he steps up and just whales it right across the green into the pond. Done.
Yeah.
I mean, just absolutely no chance from that point. Crushes his chances of winning, crushes his chances of going to the PGA Championship.
Crushes his life.
Because for those guys, a guy like that, he's playing for an exemption.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, he's playing to go to the Masters. He's playing for everything right there, and to hit a shot that bad in that type of a moment was brutal. I felt bad for him.
Oh, absolutely.
But I mean, at the same time, that's kind of how it goes. So,
one of the worst shots I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah, especially in that situation. So,
how about wacky wagers, sir? How'd you do last week? You were on a roll.
Again.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah, Matt Havens stepped up last week. Actually wagered a 3-wood. With
you're gonna have an entire bag of woods.
know. Yeah, we've got a couple of drivers back here. The Nike driver came last week, so now we get a 3-wood with a little tiger cover on it. So that's exciting. It was one of the teams that wasn't great, but it was probably the best team that I fielded last week. And he struggled. His team didn't do all that well. He didn't really have a lot of guys who made any kind of a run. So I ran away with it. Moves my record on wacky wagers up to 18-11 on the season. So I know it saves you a trip to the post office.
That's right. So we don't have to mail out swag.
You're always excited about it. If you don't have to mail anything out, that's a bonus. And if it's not having to be mailed to Canada, that's like a double bonus.
Yeah, that's right.
So we won another golf club. So I'll be looking for putters and irons from here on in. Maybe a wedge.
There you go.
So we'll be looking for wacky wagers this week. This will be a nice one here with the PGA Championship. That's a big one. Make sure you guys get some fun offers out there. We've had a ton of great stuff throughout the season. A lot of great stuff. We've given away a lot of swag, so it's been a good time. So this will be the last major of the year. So hopefully we can do it in style. We still got a lot of fun swag. I've still got some Masters gear if that'll entice anybody that's out there. So let's come up with something fun for the week.
Cool. All right. This week, we're headed to New Jersey, right? Springfield, New Jersey, Baltusrol Golf Club for the PGA Championship. It's a long course, 7,400 yards. They make it a par 70 for the major event. It's the last time it's been held here was back in 2005.
So we'll use a light weighting.
Yeah.
You can weight it somewhat because the guys who played there are significant enough players.
Sure.
We had a debate with our stat guy via text on Saturday about just this.
I love those debates.
About just this thought, we're going to use it at 5%, stat guy.
Okay.
So it's going to be on there. I said, Phil Mickelson won it in 2005. That's significant enough to give him a tiny bit of juice in terms of a course history.
And he was against the 5%. That was good.
Seemed to
That's
think that
outrageous.
He was just advocating for not using it at all. I said, well, considering the guys who were there, Sergio's there, Adam Scott's there,
Sure.
a lot of the big names were there that are going to be playing this week. So there was 24 players in this week's field that played back in 2005. So it's small, but you can kind of see how it will relate to some of the other comparison courses that are out there.
Yeah.
They had success in 2005. They likely had success at the comparison courses over the years and then coming up to this course as well. So not totally insignificant.
Okay, all right. Guys who are long off the tee are going to have a tremendous edge this week, in my opinion. So I'm going to be looking for the bombers. They always talk about thick rough. I just think the edge goes too much on a longer course like this.
Yeah, I actually read since 2000 and I think 2006, driving distance, the guy who's won the event has averaged at least over 290 yards. So that can kind of cut away a fairly good chunk of the field right away as far as guys who are probably going to be up there and contending.
I've heard winning score predictions of anything from even par up to 10 under. My prediction is between 5 and 10 would be my prediction. I know Perry in his preview column on the website agrees that it'll be closer toward that 10 mark.
Sure.
I think that's probably
I think it'll be pretty similar to the U.S. Open where it was -4, and then 11 years ago it was -4.
Right.
So somewhere right around that -5 range, or a little bit better depending on if one player can kind of get hot and make a little bit of a run.
Okay. Key stats: strokes gained tee to green, especially strokes gained off the tee. Strokes gained putting, birdies or better percentage, par 4 scoring, proximity to the hole, and scrambling. The exact weightings will be built into the model on our website. You can download that and adjust them however you want. It's completely interactive, but we put the weightings that the Fantasy Metrics guys put out, and so we build that into what it is there.
Yeah, I would say also bogey avoidance here. That's another
Fair
stat
enough.
that's
In
going to
just
be
about every major, yeah.
It's going to be really important for this week. You know, we've seen a particular comparison course, which I'm not going to mention specifically. I'll probably save that for some of our write-ups
Nice.
on the site.
Tease.
And if they haven't already figured it out. But but for the particular course that we're looking at, bogey or birdie or better percentage is actually a lot lower in terms of its weighting, and bogey avoidance is about the same in terms of birdie or better percentage as far as that weighting. So definitely something to check out. We want guys who don't necessarily make a lot of mistakes while they're out there.
Right. As far as strategy goes for the Millionaire Maker itself, we talk a lot about ownership percentage. Week after week, it's absolutely critical in GPPs to estimate what ownership percentage is going to look like and then adjust your roster accordingly. We have the tool on our site where Zach and I both put our estimates as to what we believe the ownership will be on each player in the field. We're generally pretty darn accurate.
Yeah, it's pretty good. We usually have one or two where the guys are way off the charts out there, but you know, generally I would say 80 to 90% we're pretty right on with. Yeah.
For the major tournaments and the Millie Maker, I think it's important to stress that each individual's ownership isn't as important as, say, the aggregate, the entire amount of the field, because we've seen in the last couple of majors the Millionaire Maker winning teams have contained very high-owned individual players.
And what's important, and one of the things that I'm going to talk about this week in my column, is each of the majors is a little bit different in terms of how chalky you would expect your Millionaire Maker lineup to be, with the Open Championship probably being the least chalky, although this year it actually proved to be very chalky. But a year ago, if you look back with Zach Johnson winning, a lot of the other names that were up there near the top in terms of winning lineups, it proved to be one of the more contrarian type of lineups that you'd end up having there, just due to the fact that the weather plays such a huge role. But the PGA Championship and the U.S. Open tend to be courses where they're so challenging that only the best players are going to be out there and handling it. You'll get one or two guys that sneak into the top 10 that surprise a little bit, but you're going to see the Jason Days. You're going to see the Dustin Johnsons that are going to be up there. Rory again and again. Sergio Garcia. And those guys are going to be highly owned. So you're going to see a much higher percentage. So this week, this would be one of the weeks where I say don't worry as much about the chalk, because you do need the elite players to handle the course. You're just not going to find too many guys at 6,200 that have a real chance to jump up and compete and be in the top 10 this week. And
like we had for the Open Championship, there are certain guys that pretty much, you wanted on your roster even though they were highly owned, like a Charles Schwartzel. The value was just so good that you're just going to accept the high ownership with them. And that's the same for this tournament as well.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, there's two or three guys that I think you're not going to maybe have them on every GPP roster, but it just, with the way that the pricing is set up, it allows you so much flexibility with the rest of your team that you're going to diversify elsewhere, rather than being kind of obstinate and just saying, I'm not going to roster this guy just because I know he's going to be highly owned. you play the guy and you find other spots.
Well, I just have a hard time when I'm building rosters, and I started doing this a few days ago. I get down to $7,300 player, and it's Charles Schwartzel or Byung-Hyun An or who else is down there? Like a Harris English or something like that. It's
exactly.
Just like, and then I have a hard time.
Do you want to just take a leap and hope that those guys do well? Because that's really what ends up happening with a lot of those guys. Maybe once a year in a major, one of those guys will show up and do something. For the vast majority of the time, those guys are either barely making the cut or finishing somewhere in the middle of the field where we know Schwartzel can compete. We know he has a pretty good chance to finish top 25, if not better, for the week. And if you can lock in a top 25, that's really difficult to pass up, because as long as the guy is in the top 25 and he's moving around the last day, he's got a chance to jump it. 1 or 2 shots can jump him to 5th or 6th place on the event. And that's really all you want with each of your guys. You want the winner, and then you want the rest of your roster being able to compete for top 10 positioning.
Should we start breaking down some players?
Let's do it.
All right, let's start at the top. Dustin Johnson, yay or nay, Zachary?
I think yay. He's been a yay for me for the last few weeks. The only time I was off him, I was not on him for the Open Championship, just because I felt like he'd won 2 straight events with weather being as much of a factor as it was. I thought that might be the one that kind of broke the momentum a little bit. He still finished in 9th place, so not bad. So even if you had him there, he didn't completely let your teams down. But he's been so good. He's got 5 or 6 straight events, not just in the top 10, but I think in the top. He's got a few of them here. He's obviously got a couple of wins, but he's been a top 10 machine so far this year. Hasn't missed a cut on the season so far. And if you look at the way he handled himself at the WGC and at Oakmont, those are both similar style setups for what we're looking at this week, and he's just crushed that style. I mean, last year when he struggled with his putter, obviously, you could say, well, I just don't trust him. I think he's going to be in position, but then he's going to have these meltdowns. But his putting has been well above average.
And his approach game has been off the charts, too. Yeah, it was shit last year.
Every part of the game has been so good this season. There's just not a real weakness in the game right now. The head game is really what's come together for him. We haven't seen near as many meltdowns. And I think now that he's got that first major under his belt, he's the pressure is off him now. Now he can just go out there and play and enjoy himself a little bit, not have to worry about the talk of, well, he's a choker, he can't do it on Sundays, he's going to fall apart. So I think this from here will just start, string over the next few years where he picks up a handful more major event titles. So I will be on DJ this week. I think he's probably going to be owned by 30% of the field, but I
agree.
He was owned by about that last week, and you still needed him on your roster after he finished up in 2nd place. He had 115 points on the week, which covered him in terms of value for the salary. So, I'm definitely going to be on DJ this week.
Okay, if you're going to go to another high-end player besides DJ, and I agree with you, I am high on DJ, who else would it be if you had a second choice?
Moving down a little bit, I think it might be Rory McIlroy. Yeah. He has been tremendous in terms of PGA championship setups. He's already won 2 PGA championships. He had 3 other top 10s, so he's been just a monster at these. He probably would have had another one last year too, except for the fact that he rolled his ankle goofing around playing soccer with his buddies. And we were out there Whistling Straits. It was his first event back in probably 4 or 5 weeks or so. He went out and he finished in 17th. Not bad for having a little bit of rust out there and playing for the first time in a long time. So Roy does real well at these types of courses. He's been playing well. He won over in Ireland earlier. He's been a fixture in the top 10. He's been just about on the doorstep again and again. He just hasn't been able to push it across.
But still coming up with good finishes. He had a good finish at the Open, as rough as he looked during parts of that tournament.
And he still finished 5th. The only event that he has not played well in was the U.S. Open. That made a lot of guys look really bad with the challenge of the course, and then with some of the weather that they were dealing with. That threw a lot of guys off their game, so I think you can kind of dismiss that one a little bit if a guy didn't do well. So I think dropping down to Rory is a reasonable play. Him and Day, he'll be slightly less owned than Jason Day. I think Day's probably around 20, Rory's probably around like 17, 18% or so this week.
Yep. Dropping a little bit lower, a couple of guys who I don't normally roster, but I'm leaning toward this week. One is Bubba Watson. Just because he's long off the tee, he scores, and he's really cheap this week. He's only $9,000. We saw that he didn't finish very well at the Open Championship.
He had a ton of points.
That's what counts, because he racked up the birdies and eagles. So He was part of the Millionaire Maker team for the Open, and he finished, like 40th or something, 47th?
It wasn't a great finish, but point-wise, he was in the top 20.
Right. So. And so I like Bubba this week, and another guy, and you might be upset with this at 8,800, Hideki.
I'm not upset.
You're not upset? Okay. I like Hideki this week.
That's going to be your contrarian.
Total contrarian, GPP Millionaire Maker team.
From the Memorial onward, just...
It has. He's been terrible 4 straight events, but before then he was amazing.
Right. He was 30% owned. Everybody loved him. He was the chalkiest of the chalk.
Yep. But we've seen this a million times. He's had a bad stretch, but he's not a bad player. He will come back at some point.
One of the best ball strikers out there.
Absolutely. Long off the tee, and I think his ownership is going to probably hover around 5% this week. Even.
Is it going to get that low?
I think so.
I think I targeted closer to like the 8% range, 8 to 10.
But
maybe.
he sits right next to Kuchar, right next to Watson, and I think those are going to be more popular plays. So I think I'm going to get him real low ownership, and you can't tell me that he has no chance to finish top 10. Of course he does.
Absolutely. I think it's just a head thing right now. It's a confidence thing for him. He's got to make it through that first round without just having a collapse on day one. He's one of those guys where I think once things start going the wrong direction, it spirals for him in a hurry, which is pretty common for younger players. I mean, what is he, 23?
Yeah.
So still, you think about it. I mean, we've been watching him the last few years. It seems like he's been around forever.
Oh, for sure.
He's like 23 years old. So, yeah, I think it's just one of those stretches where things don't quite start out the right way. He gets into his head, and then he just can't get out of his own way. So once things click just a little bit for him, all the talent is certainly there. But I guess I would probably be a little bit contrarian going up a couple $100.
Okay.
At 9,000, I'm probably going to grab a little bit of. Then you're looking for
at 9,000.
9,000, I'm looking for 92. 92.
Ricky. Yeah, I knew you were going to say Ricky, but then when you said 9,000,
looking for Ricky Fowler this week. I think he's set for a bounce back.
I've thought that the last several tournaments.
Let me just keep trying to catch that knife.
It's coming.
Yeah, it's right in my eyeball. But he's had some moments. Obviously, not really so much the Open or at the U.S. Open, but he did have a spark where he finished in 10th place out at Firestone at the WGC at Bridgestone there. He's got the skill set. When you just look at the numbers, obviously he's long off the tee. He putts the ball pretty well. He's pretty good in terms of his par 4 scoring. Birdie or better, bogey avoidance. He's up there in both of those categories this week. He came out of the gate just on fire at the start of the season. He had like 6 top 10s.
Yeah, I thought it was going to be a big
events.
year for Ricky.
Looked like he was going to win his second before falling apart in Phoenix. Was looking great all the way up until he got to Augusta. And then from there, moving forward, he's hit a real rough patch.
Spring break.
Yeah, exactly. We keep alluding back to the spring break trip. He just hasn't gotten over it yet. But at 9,200, I think there's still some value there. And I think he's a guy, he was only owned by about 7%.
I know, for the Open. Yeah, he's going to be around there.
He didn't impress, so that number is not going to rise. Nope. So I think if you're looking to find a guy in the upper range, you might want to look at a guy like Hideki. You might want to look at a guy like Ricky, because that could be the difference. Either one of those guys could go off and
absolutely
win the
and
set. Everyone's
going to gravitate towards Sergio right there. Sure. He's going to be owned by 20-some%.
He's been so hot.
Of course.
Top 5 finish after top 5 finish. He's at a win. And I think at 9,400, he was 30% at the Open Championship. And he finished in 5th. So that number is not going down.
Probably
you get a couple $1,000s below those top few guys. He'll be the next guy. If somebody starts off with a DJ, they very well could go down to Sergio and make him the number 2 guy on there. So you're going to see a ton of Sergio ownership. You're going to see a ton of Kuchar ownership. You're not going to see much for Matsuyama. You're not going to see much for Ricky. So I think both of those guys there are very interesting plays this week.
Thank you, sir. All right, dropping down to the 7 and 8K range. What are you liking in that area?
I think just for consistency, I'll probably grab up a guy like Zach Johnson. He's a real solid play at 8,400. You can use him in cash. You can use him in GPPs. Probably target about a 10th to 15th place finish for the week, and that's fine. I don't mind. He did well at the U.S. Open. He did well at the Open. He plays really well on tough courses. He's a guy who just doesn't make a ton of mistakes. Doesn't have a lot of distance off the tee, but he keeps it from being going all over the place. I mean, Bubba's out there. He's hitting it on the train tracks. He's out of bounds. He's in the water. Zach Johnson just puts it into the fairway, puts it under the green, makes his par. gets out of there. So he's not going to score a lot, but he doesn't have to score a lot this week. He's one of those guys I probably could be around like 5th or 6th place, sliding back a little bit. I don't anticipate that he'll make a big run, but I'm very comfortable paying $8,400 for him on my roster there. And then dropping down a little bit, Patrick Reed, what do you think about him this week?
I like Patrick Reed. He's one of the few players that I like in that mid-7 through the 8K range. It's just kind of a dead zone for me. Nothing really intrigues me, but Patrick Reed's the only guy that I think has a tremendous amount of upside. We talked about scrambling being a key metric this week. He's a scrambler extraordinaire, so I like him at 8,100. I'll be going probably 20 to 30% exposure to him.
It's interesting that you say you hate that range because there's a guy just below Patrick
Don't
Reed.
say it.
Just below at 8,000.
Yeah, I know.
Who you loved
just
2 weeks ago, and he's now $1,700 cheaper than he was just a couple weeks ago. It's Brandon Grace. Mm-hmm. Are you off of him now?
I'm not completely off of him. We're just on a course. I really like him on real link style courses. Sure. Now his price is cheaper. We're not on a link style course. I loved him for the Open, and he obviously disappointed. But he obviously won the RBC Heritage at Harbortown, which isn't a links course. But
it's par 70, yeah.
Yeah, I'm just not as high as I normally am on him. And you don't need to say Martin Keimer either because, again, not link style, so I won't be heavy on Martin like I was.
He's back in the U.S.
Doesn't bode well for him.
Doesn't seem like it. The last couple of years, he has these little stints in Europe where he's top 10, top 10, top 10, top 10. Comes over to the U.S., 35th, 42nd.
Right.
30th.
For the most part, yeah. Obviously, Pinehurst and
yeah, so it's
Sawgrass. But
the real tough courses, he tends to do well. This could be one that he does, but I don't know. I'm not feeling him this week.
No, I'm not either.
But I will be on Grace. I do think that Grace fits this course pretty well. I mean, we saw him at Oakmont take 5th place.
Yeah,
very similar style setup overall, so he's done well there. He did pretty well at the WGC event as well. So I think if you look at those two courses and then you kind of compare that with what we see this week, I think he could bounce back. I think he's making the cut for sure, so I will probably play him on my cash game lineups. And I know he's got that upside. At 8,000, I can fit him into a ton of different rosters that are out there and know that at any point he could be a guy that just shoots up the standings. Right. And if I'm not on him this week, I just know by Sunday I'm going to be kicking myself saying, it was so obvious. It was right there in front of me. So he's definitely a guy that I will be on. But I guess dropping down into the 7K range, you said you don't really like a lot of guys up at the top. At 7,700, J.B. Holmes is there. Yeah. He was not popular at all coming into the Open Championship after being just terrible in Scotland. Yep. And naturally, he turned it on the following week. Finishes in 3rd place at the Open Championship, which for me, it kind of came out of nowhere.
Didn't make any sense.
The Godfather predicted it right over here.
Yeah, he did. Congrats, Pat Mayo. You called it.
He was all over him, but I certainly was not. Now we're coming back to the U.S. We've got a course where bombers tend to play pretty well, but his price is definitely up a little bit higher. Do you like him this week?
No, I don't actually really like J.B. Holmes
Really?
this week. No.
Wow, I thought you would be. I thought you were going to be on him this
When
week.
I'm doing my roster construction, I'm finding that I'm needing guys down in the low 7s and the 6s. Sure. So he's just kind of in a dead area for me. So I don't have a lot of J.B. Holmes. When I have 7,300 left, I'm locking and loading Charles Schwartzel into most of my lineups just because he's so ridiculously cheap. He just got so much upside. And then I'm dropping down into the 6s. I think there's some good buys to be had. I talked about Andy Sullivan for the Open Championship.
Dropping way down,
yeah, and he's less, which is crazy. He's got like 6 straight top 25s.
Sure.
Both at the U.S. Open and at the Open top 25s. He's so incredibly cheap. I just can't get around rostering him on a lot of Millionaire Maker teams.
How do you feel about Daniel Berger at 6,600?
I like Daniel Berger if he's healthy.
If he's healthy, right?
How are we going to know this?
We won't know that. He's certainly not going to be real sharing with the DFS community after having his Twitter account lit on fire for about a week-long period of time there, and deservedly so.
Yeah. I love the Berger play. I love the Koepka play.
And Berger statistically is just... He's a great value. And then to be at 6,600.
It's crazy.
Koepka's a good value. Berger is an amazing value. If you look at his play, he's really balanced. He's got a great tee to green game, putts the ball really well, and his long irons, really good with the long irons. And a lot of second shots this week are going to be long irons because a lot of these par fours are going to be in that 450 to 500 range. So he's a guy who ranks really highly
for sure.
in proximity from over 200 yards out. So
what do you have his ownership at? I think 5 to 8.
Yeah, it's gonna be mid single digits, somewhere around that 5 to 7 range, I think, because people aren't gonna trust them.
They're not.
People, if whether it's a club change, whether it's an injury, whatever it is, anything that's out there floating around, if we don't get clarification on it, people are out. So definitely you're not going to be using Berger on your cash game roster.
Oh no.
If he comes out and he's struggling and he just can't get the shoulder loose,
and if he starts poorly. All of a sudden it's going to be.
If he has a bad first round, he could easily just withdraw and say, you know what, it's just not ready to go. I'm not feeling it. I tried this.
Not
week.
A high integrity guy is what you're saying?
No. Well, no, but I do see him. I do see him at least making the effort this week to get through most of a round, and he's going to give it a shot this week. I have seen nothing. I've seen his girlfriend's page as well.
What were you on his girlfriend's Twitter page for?
We follow,
research.
We're
right?
followers. Yeah, we follow her. Yeah, exactly.
You are committed to this gig. I tell you what.
We got to get that intel. Right? So. Yeah, I mean, with Daniel Berger, that's a key factor. That is like a key statistic for Daniel Berger. Like, how much are you going to weight his girlfriend into your model for the week? And usually for him, it's about 30%. So
you'd probably weight her on your model.
Wow. Well played, sir. Well played.
Anyway, 5K range, anything?
5K range.
Yeah.
There's a couple guys that are down there. I've heard the name Jamie Lovemark bandied around a bit. He's kind of
Pat Mayo's guy.
He's kind of turned into a zombie since that second place finish down in New Orleans.
Yeah.
Where he had just opportunity after opportunity to win the Zurich.
Yep.
He's been terrible. He hasn't finished higher than I think 53rd in his last 7 or 8 events.
He started so strong. I think he's got so much talent.
Yeah, he's a monster. He's a big dude. He can hit the ball a ton. He putts pretty well. He scrambles well. He's got lots of different tools in place. I think there's a case right now where he's going through some things in his head. The one loss just caused him to spiral down a little bit, and he hasn't pulled all the way out of it. But at 5,900, it's just a question of, is he making the cut or not? Because if he makes the cut, 5,900, he's paying that off.
Right.
So I think I could see sprinkling in maybe 5%, 10%. I'm obviously not going to overweight him because I don't trust him. If your upside is a 53rd place finish, then he made through the cut, but you have almost no chance of winning a Millionaire Maker if he's in 50th place. So he's got to display a little bit more upside than that. So I'll probably have a small share of him. There's a couple of old timers down at the 5,600 range. If you want to take a look at VJ Singh or David Toms, both of those guys. I think VJ will be the chalkier of the two at like 2 or 3% ownership. David Toms will be the contrarian play at 1% for that range. They both actually tied for 10th place here in 2005. They've had pretty good histories on similar style setups. The tricky part for a guy like David Toms is he just has zero distance on his tee shots anymore. So that 7,400 yard par 70 really could eat him up in terms of what he's got going. Although he's had a really nice season so far. And same with VJ. VJ's been playing pretty well. He's 12 out of 18 in terms of making the cut. And if VJ shows up for some of these courses, typically he's still able to perform, even at a little older age. Still has a really good tee to green game. Obviously, he's never been able to putt particularly well. But I could see, I probably won't. I guess I would say I wouldn't use them for the Millionaire Maker.
I wouldn't either.
The upside's not there.
Right.
They each could make the cut.
Yep.
But I think each of their upside is capped. If they have a great weekend, maybe they take 40th.
Right.
Maybe that's what they do, 40th place.
Yep.
And sometimes there's been a couple Millionaire Maker lineups. And one of them for the Masters had Troy Merritt.
I know.
I think he finished in like 42nd or something like that. But
everyone else was in like the top 3, I think.
Right. The rest of your lineup needs to be boom, 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 boom. Yeah. So I don't see why you would roster either one of those guys.
Agreed.
They're not going to be far enough up the standings in terms of leaderboard to make them worthwhile. If you're playing on maybe some small field and you really want to stack up at the top, maybe take your shot. But
there's some guys in the lower 6K range. There's several of them who we'll keep for our columns this week.
Definitely.
But I think that's probably where I'm going to draw the line is that 6K. There's a couple guys right there.
2 or 3 guys right at the number
Yep.
that I still like this week that are definitely playable for us. So.
Well, that'll do it for us. If you have any questions on strategy, roster composition, or anything, be sure to email us at info@fantasygolfinsider.com. Our Twitter handle is @fantasygolfers. You can check out Zachary every Wednesday night on Periscope.
I'm going to put the pressure on one of our other writers to do a Periscope in the next day or two.
Oh, all right.
So we'll see which one of the 3 staff writers we can rouse to get on there for all you guys to go on and take your shots at. So
very good. Obviously, let us know how you're doing in the Millionaire Maker this weekend. Hopefully, we can get one of those optimal lineups, making a run at the $1 million again. That'd be insane.
I can picture what's gonna happen right
Everyone's
now.
all geared up.
We're gonna
with it.
instead of 25, we're gonna have about 85 people play the top optimal lineup.
In the Millionaire Maker.
Yeah. And I'm not even going to say what will happen to it, but yeah. It's just set up so perfectly after the last 2 where it finished really highly in the mix. So we'll see how that goes.
Good luck to all of you, and we will talk to you next week.
Good luck.